We're live.
We're live. And I have quarantine hair, but I guess we'll live with that. Welcome to my kitchen. And a lovely kitchen it is, a lovely day. Nice and cool with lower humidity than usual for out here, which is very important since this whole curing process with the Kyphi really relies on getting a lot of the moisture out of it because this is very sticky stuff. The first batch that we'll be playing with is the one that I've called Silver Mirror, done in May, started the 5th of May, I believe, and it is tied to a lunar cycle. And it is, well, it's been sitting around for what, nearly 6 months? How, 6?
Wow. Yeah, it is nearly.
Yeah, nearly 6.
4.
4. I mean, long enough.
May.
Yeah, May. You can count.
Whatever.
I can't count.
Yeah,
I mean, whatever.
On good days.
Oh. So it has been hanging out over at Inspiration House. Let me grab the big old thing of it. And the reason I've had it at Inspiration House and not here is Inspiration House, where it's located, is a little bit less muggy. Our property, opens up onto wetlands. It's always damp back there. So here is the big old slab of Kyphi that has just been sitting out and slowly drying out a little bit, curing, deepening, and growing more nuanced in its scent profile. And I kind of experimentally grabbed a couple of little bits to roll yesterday to see if it was in fact ready. It's been sitting around long enough.
How can you tell?
It will be tacky, and if it starts to get too warm on your fingers, it will start to seriously stick. But basically, how you can tell is you can just grab a little bit of it off, and without too much trouble, just boop 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 boop, and
so it's possible to roll it.
Yeah, it's possible to roll without it just being like warm chewing gum on your fingers.
Ugh.
Yeah, there's an image, right? Okay, so we're not going to just grab this entire slab. I have some various tools that I picked up. This one purely because it says Hell's Handle. It's a dough cutter. And honestly, Kyphi acts most like a dough. Honestly, really more like candy, like fudge. It's got so much fruit and honey in it. So we'll start with that chunk. And I will ask you to grab that and put it just over there where it's slightly out of the way. So even if it's cured a little bit, these are still going to be sticky and tacky to the touch, which is where this little guy comes in. This has a bunch of powdered benzoin in it, and we're using it a little bit like you would flour or confectioner's sugar. So once I roll it, and I have a bunch of them, I'm going to dump them in there, shake them up, and get them a good coating of this. Once I get one of these little things over here.
Oh, and we should say, so it's been a while since we did these Kyphi live streams. So if folks have any questions about Kyphi, the process of making it, it's been at least 4 months.
Yeah,
so we're on here talking about it.
So how this works is,
questions.
This is a long and slow process. I'm going to be sitting here for a while. We will be live streaming the rolling, and while I am tediously taking small pieces of incense and turning them into usable balls, ask me questions. I'm going to be at Michigan Para-Unity tomorrow.
Minnesota.
Michigan.
But it's online.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
It's not like there's a difference for us.
Well, no, it's important to them. Sorry, Minnesota Para-Unity. I got Para-Unity right.
Yeah.
And I can't get this thing off. That's annoying. Let me get a different one.
Aw, thanks for all the birthday wishes, folks.
There we go.
And hello, lots of familiar names and faces.
So, boop, in goes a little bit more benzoin. benzoin is one of the ingredients used in some of the later recipes of Kyphi. It does not appear on the recipe that is on the walls of the Temple of Edfu, but it has a honey sort of scent to it, so it really just adds to the honey notes that are already in Kyphi. Never really thought, oops. That's why there's a lid.
Well, here's a question, unrelated to Kyphi.
Yeah.
Someone is looking into Irish and Scottish folk magic. Do you have any web suggestions?
I mean, first,
Maybe people to follow.
Morgan Daimler, and I apologize to her if I'm pronouncing her last name wrong. Daimler has been doing a lot of work on fairies and lore from that part of the world, and that would be a good jumping off point. I'm trying to remember if she has just a website or a podcast, since I've not been much of a podcasty person keeping up on that stuff. But look at Daimler's work and sort of like see what she is connected to, and kind of go from there. I also find there are a number of folkloric works that were gathering like spells and charms at the end of the 1800s, while there were still people who were practicing this. So if you go and pop around on Google Books, especially in like Yorkshire, Derbyshire, a couple of other places, you can find like from the Folklore Society and some other writers gathering like first-person accounts of charms and beliefs that were still alive and well at the late 1800s and leading into the 1900s.
So can you talk about which batch of Kyphi this is?
So this is the batch that we started in May of 2020. I'm trying to remember if that was
silver moon. It's a supermoon.
Yeah, it was a supermoon, and so I have called it Silver Mirror. I didn't give it a name at the time, but Kyphi in general is intended to sort of like open up the gates to imagination and allow us to have better access to dreams and spirit communication. And it was burned at night in the temple, and so this one with the supermoon is to sort of invoke a lot of that like lunar and night energy, but also the illumination aspect of it. I'm actually going to grab a little of the benzoin, and much like one would during making food or dough or whatnot. Where did I put that? I'm going to put a little pile of it.
That is a very good idea.
Right.
This is sticky.
Yeah. So get some of it on your fingertips if they start getting sticky.
They're already sticky enough for it to stick.
Yeah.
So. To permanently stick.
Well, it helps if your hands are cool.
They're extremely cool right now.
Well, that's unusual for you.
Well, it's like 50 degrees outside. So I've just been...
It's lovely, aside from the bird-eating chipmunk. I don't know if you saw my Twitter, but I looked out because the cats, there's a horde of chipmunks that the cats have been fascinated by. Like, we open the front door and it's pretty much cat TV. And that's cool, that's fine. And then I look out and I'm like, what is that a dead bird? What's the chipmunk doing eating so close to a dead bird? Oh God, it's eating the dead bird. What the fuck? Apparently they do that. The thing is like I'd expect them to do that if like the food was scarce. There is no scarcity of food around here. Like
maybe birds taste like bacon. I don't know.
Poor sparrow.
I had seen squirrels eating meat before, but
and I know
chipmunks.
Yeah, well, and I know deer will as well to get like
that's not scary at all.
Calcium, I guess. Well, they'll eat bones.
We've got a question from Sab White. What has been the hardest during lockdown?
I mean, okay, up until recently, lockdown has been pretty much just business as usual. I don't leave the house much if I'm not traveling, and I'm not, I don't really greatly enjoy traveling. Like, I like the end result of traveling, seeing people who are cool that I wouldn't be able to hang out with otherwise. The hardest thing lately, and I feel petty for it, but I really kind of miss going out to a restaurant and just sitting and hanging out, listening to people, doing some people watching, talking with Illyria, just the experience of that. Um, and it's only been the past couple of weeks that I think I've been a little bit like stir crazy for that.
Yeah. Same here.
And I think it was partly because of your birthday. It's like that's like a big thing. Like, we would go out, we'll go out to eat, we'll hang out, like get sushi for Illyria.
Yeah.
And it's just adapting.
Yeah, I was never one to really enjoy going into stores, so it's kind of a relief to not have any pressure to do that now. That one's too big.
Yeah, just go for it. I mean, they're never, none of them are going to be the same size. Like,
This is their hand rolled.
yeah, they're hand rolled. But I have found with the way you have to burn this, that smaller is better.
Okay.
And actually, once you get it on your end, what I've found is squish it down from a ball, and make it a little bit more like a pastille. It's just coating it in this stuff. It's much easier as a ball, and the balls are actually symbolic. There is a connection to the scarab, Kepra, that would roll the ball of dung, and there's a couple of references to folks using this stuff in spells, or a similar type of incense in spells. And like, you're rolling it like like the scarab beetle rolls the ball of dung, which is representative of the sun at night that is then reborn in the morning.
That's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff where Kyphi is sacrament as much as incense. There's a lot of symbolism in all the parts that go into making it, and the process of making it, and then the process of rolling it when you're done. And this is so much easier to roll than the stuff I made last year. It's still sticky, but last year, like, I was just, what?
I'm gonna adjust it so my face is actually on camera, since I'm helping out with the rolling this time.
Cool. I think that's
oh,
good.
That's not the right one. Oh, it's so hard to figure out which of these
Is actually
is which.
Yeah. Get off my finger. Yep, I've hit there's too much sticky stuff on my fingers. Yeah. Really? And this is baking parchment, unbleached baking parchment, to just make life a little easier on us.
The real reason behind me moving the camera is that a couple people said they liked my hair, so I thought I would show more of it. It's entering that sunsetting stage where it's slowly changing colors.
Well, I mean, very important people have liked your hair over the summer, so.
I'm not sure I could live there. They tolerated it, that's for sure. This is still super sticky.
Well, and what will be interesting is the stuff. So this was the stuff that was still made with raisins. So the one last year was dates, and this one we tried raisins. And then the one that I made for the eclipse, the base was figs, and that one has a completely different texture. So one of the reasons why there's different types of dried fruit with it is, although the translations from the stuff that's recorded on the temple at Edfu says raisins, there's some debate about whether or not they just meant dried fruit, as opposed to dried grapes. Now, it's not to say they did in fact have grapes at that time. They would.
Is that like a sort of ancient version of, like, is it Coke or is it soda?
Yes.
So they're like, oh, just use like some sort of Coke, but what they mean is like a sugary beverage, and they just happen to call it the word that's also the name of a very specific one of that.
Yeah.
That was the weirdest thing to realize, that some people called like
all sodas
Sprite
Coke
and 7-Up and Dr. Pepper, it's all Coke. I mean, super clever on Coca-Cola's point. a marketing ploy.
Absolutely. And if you notice that habit happens most in the South, where you have Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola. I just committed heresy to somebody, I'm sure.
Me. Pepsi's not the same.
No, it's really not. Although, unless I am mistaken, the same holding company, so a solitary holding company owns controlling stock in both of them.
Oh, no.
And the cola wars are just a fantastic marketing strategy.
Yeah, that sounds about right for this era.
Yeah, Figgy International. Based out of, I learned about it in college because it's based out of Cleveland. It's just somebody's last name.
Okay. Did they know that there's a pudding named after them? They probably did that too.
No, it was Figgie, Figgy International.
Okay.
I kind of want like a little thing to get these out of here to.
I'm helping.
Yeah, totally helping. Yeah, I want a spoon or something to pull those out. Should maybe a fork. Well, I need something for the stuff to like go through.
What about a bowl and like a sieve?
Nothing that's gonna fit in there.
No, I mean you dump it into the bowl through the sieve, and then you can. Oh, I guess that's just in a different container.
Really a lot of work.
Oh, I don't know. I feel like normally I think you'd be on the side of like use the big tools.
Yeah.
And I'd be on the side of like just do it by hand. But not this time. Did you know I was rolling this ball of Kyphi and it stuck to my finger in a place I couldn't see, and I was like, where did it go?
See, there we go. Oh, it's still getting some out, but that's fine. We're
gonna need some more of this finger benzoin. We barely started.
That's why I bought several pounds of that.
I am very glad you did.
Yeah, this is a very like intensive for stuff. Ingredient intensive. That's what I'm trying to say. It's been a day. I don't know about everybody else, but the news cycle has me just a little afluster. Going to sleep with that news because we were still awake when it hit, and sort of like watching it unfold with the nope, totally not a thing. Oh, yep, totally a thing.
Got a question for you.
Yeah.
Are there any varieties of Kyphi that are from Ireland or Scotland? From the same person who's
this particular style of incense making is unique to ancient Egypt. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't use the same style and apply it to things that would be native to the British Isles, Ireland, Scotland, or whatever. And I believe that there are a couple of crafters on Etsy who've done just that. So, like, they take the idea of using local fruits plus honey as a base and wine, although I believe the one I'm thinking about substitutes mead. So she uses honey wine and local fruits and honey, and then makes a collection of local plants that are traditionally used for in sacred applications, incense and whatnot. Now, the thing that's difficult with that is the recipe is incredibly resin heavy. So there is a lot of frankincense, a lot of myrrh, a lot of pine, a lot of gum mastic. And the frankincense, the pine, the mastic all like kind of fall on the piney like scent profile, and it's held together with a few things, some tubers and rhizomes ground up, lemongrass, mint, and a couple of other things. But like the really resin heavy aspect, I'm not sure outside of pine resin what's going to be native if your goal is to have something that is crafted from native sacred scents that are simultaneously pleasing and non-toxic.
Always a good goal when it's something that apparently a lot of people see and think would be a good idea to put in their mouths.
Well, that's one of the ways that the recipe for Kyphi, uh, originally called kapet, which is just the word for incense, by the way, is old. Of things that are in this, written into the recipe, we're not 100% sure that those are actually the plants. Some of them may be extinct. Some of them are certainly known by different names now. And so one of the ways that researchers were able to kind of track down the likeliest candidates was Kyphi was something that was also used in medicine and as a breath freshener. Ergo, it had to have been reasonably non-toxic. And I say reasonably non-toxic because in the ancient world there were a number of things that folks didn't have a problem ingesting if it happened to create hallucinations or a euphoric state that might have been a benefit in certain circumstances. So I think there is like an iris rhizome that's a little bit debated of like, do they mean orris root or do they mean tiger nuts, which are in fact neither nuts nor related to tigers, but are still used as a candy and a snack now. And actually, one of the older candy recipes is a recipe for ground tiger nuts in honey, and you make like these little pyramid cakes out of it.
Oh.
And if you're curious about tiger nuts, which are related to but not an identical version of what I used in this, you can pop over on Amazon and find tiger nuts. They're very popular in the paleo crowd, and they make also a flour that is a wheat replacement.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad there are really specialized diets like that that mean strange ingredients come back into being more accessible.
Yeah, if you watched the earlier recipes of me wrestling with making this stuff, the rhizome that you can probably replace with tiger nuts, they're related. They're again not identical in the sense that like different types of mint are related, but they have different scents slightly. So like apple mint has one scent, and Egyptian mint has one scent, and spearmint and peppermint, etc. They were those like, they kind of looked like little bugs. They were like small and dark and incredibly dense, like really hard to pound into a thing. And I broke a couple of grinders just desperately trying to make these things work. The only reason I haven't picked up tiger nut flour yet is the flour is tiger nuts without their husk. And I'm not entirely certain that like only the inside was important. Maybe they needed the husk. I'm not sure. And there's nothing in the recipes to tell you husk, do you shell these nuts or not? But I will say that if they don't tell you to shell it, they probably mean you're using the whole thing, because there is a point when they're talking about raisins, which is also why I think raisins are actually dates, because they say that you stone the raisins and clean the inside.
That does sound more like a date.
Yes, it sounds a lot like a date.
Although it's also hard to know what varieties of raisin were around in the ancient world.
Well,
somebody might know.
We know that from ancient writings of people reporting on like trade goods, Egyptian wine was red and sweet. So whatever types of grapes grown at the oases were red, basically produced red and sweet wine.
Okay.
Probably
those
not.
Could be plums.
Probably we know that it was grapes.
Okay.
They were one of the first places that was making wine out of grapes. And the thing is they also made wine out of dates. And there was an additional fermented drink that is the sap of the date palm, which has a very, very short shelf life. Like it ferments almost immediately. Wow. And there was some debate about, is that what they mean? And let me tell you, in the United States, like it's impossible to get the date wine, let alone like this basically like date beverage. So I don't get to experiment with that. But figs are fairly easy to get a hold of. And like I said, the second batch, I think in future, I'm going to be inclined to use a combination of figs and dates. But the fun thing is I get to experiment, and I managed to put in orders for frankincense and
This is
myrrh.
Spencer, right?
Yeah, that's Spencer. I only brought one. There's no chance of getting confused. I only brought one thing up.
I mean, I'm pretty good at getting confused.
Well, like the next one, I'm gonna try to dust it in dragon's blood. But since I made that second batch, dragon's blood for some reason has become incredibly rare. So it's like $160 a pound.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah, and if I had realized that at the time, I'm not sure I would have made an entire batch where basically I replaced frankincense with dragon's blood, because that's one of like
Premium Kyphi.
Oh, it's I will not be making it again, short of buying some dragon's blood in bulk. And the only place I found where I could buy it in bulk at a price that would be workable sells it in lots of 55 pounds, and I just don't think I need that much dragon's blood, nor could I store it. So we're just sort of out of luck on the dragon's blood. Maybe after COVID, if things, well, whatever the new normal after all of this is, when we get a handle, if we get a handle on the pandemic, maybe things will change with the accessibility and availability of dragon's blood. It's hard to say because a lot of the really popular resins and woods for incense, both for like the new age community as well as a lot of popular cosmetics, have become, well, they are getting increasingly rare because they are being over-harvested and overused. They're not being sustainably harvested, which is also why a lot of the stuff that I've gotten this is on the more expensive side, because I was making a point of getting stuff that was wild crafted. And I'm sad to say, COVID has taken away my biggest supplier, Wild Tree Essentials, who I was recommending to all of you guys. They were where I was getting like all the different varieties of frankincense, Arabian myrrh, a couple of other things. They're a small husband and wife company, and they both got COVID. Now they recovered, but it had enough of an impact on their health that it made them both significantly reassess everything about their lives. And the company was starting to kind of eat those lives up. So what they do now instead is only sell like the absolute highest premium style of frankincense, which is hojari. And it's harvested from Oman. It's often, you know, it's got many stories around it. It's like this, it's super rare, super clear, has a green color to it. And it's real expensive. I had bought a couple of little like teeny tiny sample bits to be like, so what's the big deal about this? And it's got a really clean, bright scent, but I think it would be wasted mixed into something like this. So long story short, I do not have, at this point, a wild crafted, sustainably harvest source for most of these. But the good news is I had bought several pounds of pretty much everything because I have hunches sometimes, and those hunches often play out.
I feel like even when the hunches don't play out, it's not a bad thing to have
surplus.
in
Yeah.
mind.
In this case, yeah. I feel like you're rolling. I'm dusting. I think as long as you don't mind.
Nope, not at all. I remembered in the first few minutes of the live stream why sometimes the live streams took 4 hours.
Yeah.
And it's that when you get focused on answering questions, your hands stop moving. So I was like, I can make my hands keep moving because I won't be speaking as much.
Could you hand me the stuff that's already rolled on that?
Yeah.
And I'll dust them. Remember when Q wanted, not that Q, Q wanted a little bit.
Yeah.
And I kind of experimentally tried to see if it was ready to be rolled. And so actually here's an interesting, you can tell the difference in like, this was before it was fully cured. And I don't know, like it's shinier and it didn't hold its shape quite as well.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It does look a little milky here.
Yeah.
Does it feel different?
Yeah, a little. Yeah, it's squishy. Okay. It's squishier.
Interesting. pre-cured. Question.
It should firm up as time goes on.
Do you think they used music while preparing special ritual items, incense, or Kyphi?
Absolutely. There are several accounts from the ancient world, mainly Greek writers who were touring Egypt, who talk about watching the priests make Kyphi. And it was a long process that involved not just music, but also the recitation of certain prayers, the singing of certain songs. There was a whole process for adding each individual ingredient, and different prayers and passages of sacred text were recited as that happened. So yes, and there's every likelihood that in addition to that, like you've got the scent of this stuff boiling in. So the room in the Temple of Edfu, it's this big complex where the Kyphi recipe is written on the walls, is called the laboratory room, because appropriately enough, they stuck the recipe on the walls in the room where they made the stuff. So, you had basically your Cliff's Notes for what you were making right where you could see it.
Makes so much sense.
Yeah, so on the laboratory room. So we know that this was where you could smell like a lot of ancient Egypt, like we know some of the ingredients in this, what they identify as, because the culture, this stuff was precious, very important to their religious system and their ceremonies, and they traded far and wide to get many of these ingredients. Not all of them came from Egypt. So we have like basically bills of lading that tell us that Hatshepsut was trading with Ethiopia for their benzoin and their myrrh, and Arabia for this and for that. And we know some of the things grew there, but they grew better in a number of other places. Cinnamon from as far off. I think people think like the ancient world, and as difficult as travel would have been, we have a hard time imagining that folks in Asia traded with folks in Egypt back then, but they absolutely did. India, Asia, possibly as far away as Vietnam, and there's still a fair amount of evidence that there was also trade overseas. Now that is highly controversial, but there have been, and I think it's in pollen and in a couple of plants, there seems to have been, somebody will have to Google this, and I remember reading a long time ago, finding tobacco on a mummy. And you'll have to like double check that because it's a really long time ago. But there are a couple of studies that look particularly in Mesoamerica and Egyptian stuff. And, not only compare the fact that, cultures similarly mummified and similarly made pyramid-shaped places of worship, but there may have been instances of trade. We know for sure that there was trade all the way up with where the Vikings were, simply because of faience beads and things that made it all the way up there. So to think that even though this was 3,000-4,000 years ago, or even longer, that they were locked to, I don't know, 10 miles around their village, that's not, there was a robust trading system, both over land as well as over water. And certainly we know for a fact that like the entire Mediterranean was an area where there was shipping that happened, that you got cedars from Lebanon, and there was trade between the Mycenaeans and the Egyptians before they became the Greeks, and Turkey and all of that. Like there's a lot of interconnectedness. It wouldn't have been quick. It certainly wouldn't have been efficient by our sense of that, but it was done.
Well, it makes sense it would be done, especially for things that are connected to ritual and belief. People's sense of how the universe works is important to them.
Yeah.
Check that question meter. Interesting. Do you think that doing energy work over Kyphi might have made it more powerful? And someone else suggests that maybe the Kyphi also made energy work more powerful?
Both. I would say both. I absolutely made this with intent. I'm not normally the sort to like pick astrological times. That stuff doesn't generally resonate with me. And yet I had realized that I tended to make batches of Kyphi at like key lunar points. And so I just decided to embrace it and run with it. So the 2 batches that I've made this year, one was on a supermoon and one started on a lunar eclipse. And I put that, the things that are associated with those, and I use that as part of the intention. I'm not a recite prayer sort of person. Like I got out of that habit as a Catholic when my best friend got like really sucked into the rosary group, and like we would just sit there doing like entire decades of the rosary over and over and over again. And I had this moment where I'm like, these words now mean nothing. We're literally just trying to race one another to the end of the rosary. So it kind of burned me out on that. So while it's not really in me to like sit and say prayers over something, it is in me to be mindful of it, to meditate on my intention, to reflect on like what my goals for this are. And that absolutely went into this work. And I think that has an effect on it. And I also think doing this based off of basically doing it by the book, like by this like ancient no shortcuts, like over the course of like 10 to 15 days, and then the long period of like waiting for it to ripen. Yeah, like there's a lot that goes into that, and I do think that you end up with a much better result. If you remember, I tried to do like a Kyphi on the cheap, where like I just, I used basically the same ingredients, but I put them all together in like one thing, and it was not the same. And now I'm too warm.
Not my fault this time.
Nope.
I'm so cool. I'm cool.
Let's try to
Hi, everybody.
Get that shirt off without getting Kyphi all over it.
I mean, the stuff smells so good.
Yeah. Well, and I like the benzoin because it brings out the honey notes. So when you first start to warm it up, and this is something that has to go over low heat. So like a Bakur burner, people have had a fairly good result with like those little burners where you have a tea light under them.
Really?
A couple of people said that was good. The one place where it's not going to be great, do not burn it directly on a hot charcoal. You need to do something over the charcoal so it's not directly on the charcoal. If you put it directly on a hot charcoal, especially when that charcoal is red, all you are going to smell is burnt sugar and burnt fruit. It's awful. Like you are wasting it. So you want something that is a lower heat, a hot plate or on your stove. There are a couple of burners, and it was Mermaid Magical Arts that I found, the one that I've got that's got like a little dial on it, and I found between I think it's between 150 and 180 degrees seems to be the optimal. Like it slowly releases it, and you definitely get like a little bit of smoke and a lot of scent, but it doesn't burn it out too quick. And it doesn't just simmer it to a point where it also doesn't heat it up enough so that you don't get stuff. Because there were a couple of wax melting things.
Yeah, where it was like 80 to 100.
Yeah, and it was just not hot enough. Like it was just like it was making it melty, but it didn't release any of the scent at all.
No fun.
Yeah, and to give you like you saw that initial piece, like here's how many little Kyphi balls we've made out of just that chunk. So there's for those of you who did not get in on like the limited pre-order, I'm confident that there will be more Kyphi. It's just a matter of going through this process.
Figuring out how much.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Kyphi left.
Yes.
I'm not sure I realized how long this was going to... Are we going to be here until like...
Oh God, no, we're not doing this whole thing.
We're not?
I mean,
But it's done curing.
It's done curing. I was thinking of doing Kyphi streams and like doing this like a little bit every couple of like that, sitting and chewing through that entire thing.
I mean, if people have questions.
Sure.
What's life without a marathon here and there? It'll only
Okay.
take 5 hours, right? Maybe 8.
I'm not sure. I mean, the Kyphi itself is like the Kyphi boil is a long enough process as it is. Let me know if you need to sit down.
At some point, I will just move my chair over here. Yeah, I will.
It's a process.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we could always get like the roommates involved and just like sit Paul down for a little while. He won't be in front of the camera, but he'll roll stuff. Probably game with the other hand.
I don't know. I would worry with Paul that he might just start like.
Oh no, he's too picky about taste.
You don't think he would like it? No,
No.
I'm offended.
No, I don't think he would like it.
I mean, to be fair, I've been tempted to nibble on it.
I mean, because it looks
Not
like
very
fudge.
tempted. It doesn't smell anything like fudge. Like, I know this is not chocolate. You can't fool a chocolate connoisseur.
That's fair.
But it does smell really good.
I mean, keep in mind, however good it smells, it has been sitting in a closet for 4 months. But the stuff that goes into it means that it doesn't get moldy.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Can you update folks on what's the story with the oils?
The story with the oils was I was waiting for all of the parts to arrive, and COVID meant that a lot of the stuff was really slow.
Have they gotten here yet?
They have gotten here yet.
Okay.
They have gotten here. I wanted to get the Kyphi pre-orders out to people before I sat down and tried to do the Kyphi oil. The one thing that was slowing me down is I really wanted to get my hands on some mastic oil. And they do make essential oil for gum mastic, and you cannot import it to the United States. They absolutely will not ship it to the United States. And I've been looking for some workarounds. Mastic being this thing that, so the growth and the harvesting and the selling of gum mastic is regulated by, very, very strictly regulated by the Chios. Anyway, it only comes from one place, and they are really particular about it. Think of it like Parmesan or any of the wines in France that like you can only call it that, or cassoulet beans that you can only call them that if they come from a certain region of France. So it's proprietary, and it's gum mastic is used as a chewing gum. It's used in medicine. It's used in incense. It's used in cooking a couple of specific Greek, like pastry, bakery sort of things. It's in liquor, a whole bunch of stuff. Toothpaste, soap.
Does that make it easy to get a hold of, or?
No, it all goes to the same place. So,
Right.
and it's expensive. Like it is actually at this point, like even more so than like the super rare frankincense, because it's how much is it running at this point? I think, oh god, I did the math and it kind of hurt my head a little bit because it was like $160 for just what I would use in this.
Wow.
It's not cheap. Anyway, so to try to make a Kyphi like wearable blend that's in like a beeswax base, I would like that essential oil, and I have accepted that I'm probably not going to get it.
It sounds like there is a mastic twig or leaf oil if you want to cheat it by trying that. An infused oil might also be easier to make.
Since the recipe calls specifically for the mastic gum, I'm hesitant to use something to like cheat around with it. I do have a friend in Canada, and they will ship to Canada. They won't ship to the United States.
Wait, what?
So
it's not about export.
No, it's not about export. It's about us.
Gotcha.
I don't know what it is about us.
It's probably our tariffs.
Probably. Whatever it is, can't get it to us. Specifically, like they will send the gum. They will not send any fluids. So any of their liquor, any of their essential oil, like none of it can come to the United States. So it's totally on us for whatever it is. Anyway, I'm looking at a way to cheat the system, and we'll see if that happens. But I wanted to get to this part with the Kyphi before I launched into basically what is another product line. And I think that I will also be making that at Inspiration House, because a number of the essential oils, when you are working with essential oils and you have pets, you have to be very careful about whether or not it's not enough that is not toxic to you. It may be not toxic to you. It may be very toxic to your pets. Tea tree oil is something to keep in mind with that. Like if you've got like a diffuser of tea tree essential oil around a cat, your cat is probably getting kidney and liver damage. So like don't do that. Like really do some research. And I don't want to be here in the kitchen with the fumes of things and accidentally cut short the lives of
Our family.
Yeah, my sweeties. So I mean, cats have incredibly picky liver and kidney systems. They're very, very sensitive to toxins. So Florida water is also really bad for cats, just FYI.
Whenever people talk about Florida water, I'm like, I wonder what it is about the water in Florida. Oh, that's what they
Yeah,
mean.
yeah. So long story short, when we get to the point of me making that stuff, we will be filming at Inspiration House in their kitchen. And the kitchen there is not quite as grand as this one, but it's a pretty decent kitchen. Actually, it was the first kitchen we walked into in a house that was that old that I was like, I don't hate this.
All right, we've got a question. Can you talk a little about the Watcher Angels and what the deck is and what the Watcher Angels are?
Oh, yeah. For hours, probably.
Definitely for hours.
Okay. So let's see, where do I start? The Watcher Angel Tarot deck is a deck I designed back in 2011. Well, I'd been working on it a long time before then, but trying to find an artist that like matched with it and could commit to a tarot was 2010, 2011 was the first time that happened. So the deck uses the myth of the Watchers as sort of the backbone of the imagery of the deck, and I marry the story of the Watchers particularly to the trumps of the tarot. So each of the tarot trumps, the major arcana, is connected to a different named Watcher in the Watcher Angel mythology. And now that mythology ties back predominantly to an extra biblical text known as the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch was canon to the Bible for the first several hundred years and started to fall out of favor as early as 300 of the Common Era. And certainly by 500 it was no longer accepted as canon. It was one of the debated things. Now unlike a number of apocryphal texts, and the Apocrypha are texts that were maybe at some point accepted as Bible canon, but then got kind of written out of it because they were disputed. They were found to be attributed. So it's like the Book of Enoch, and it's known as what's called a pseudepigraphal text, which means that Enoch didn't actually write it, but it is written in Enoch's words and language, and it's attributed to him to kind of legitimize it. A lot of the texts that were pseudepigraphal or that were proven definitively to be pseudepigraphal kind of got worked out of the Bible. Now that's not the case for the first 5 or 7 books of the Bible, which for the longest time everybody thought that Moses wrote all of that. And then they learned that no, not really. That wasn't just Moses writing that. That's a whole lot of different authors writing that.
Was it too late by them to take them out?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, and anyway, so the Book of Enoch, at the least, was written in around 300 BCE, so before Christ, which is interesting because it has a number of messianic themes to it. It is what's known as an apocalypse, And so it talks about some of like the end of the world stuff. It has references in the writings stored at Qumran, which we know as the Dead Sea Scrolls, which also helps us like nail it down as something that was written before the era of Christ. And the Book of Enoch has a number of pieces in it that are that concern calendrical stuff, cycles of time, some other things. But there's a section in it, and most scholars identify it as its oldest section, that expounds upon Genesis 4:6. Could be Genesis 6:4. I'm feeling dyslexic today. But it's the part about the sons of God looked down on the daughters of men and found them fair, and they took of them all that they desired as wives. And I'm misquoting, but it's generally what it is. Basically, it tells the story of these Beni Ha-Elohim who take wives from among the daughters of men. And the text heavily implies that these Beni Ha-Elohim, sons of God, are angels, or at least not human. The Bible doesn't really explain much past that. Like, there's a later passage that, like, in those days there were giants in the earth, and the word for giants is Gibborim. And you will see throughout the Old Testament especially, there are a couple of words, Gibborim, Nephilim, Anakim, and Rephaim, all of which are connected to these watcher angels and their children, who are human-angel hybrids, at least according to the Book of Enoch. So the Book of Enoch tells the story in full, which is Shemyaza and Azazel and Sariel, Kokobiel, and a whole bunch of other Yels all came down, 200 of them in fact, to a place called Mount Hermon, the Mountain of Descent. And they decided, since they had been set to watch over humanity, that the best way to do it was to actually be among humanity. And since humanity had such sexy ladies, they were going to go get them some. As with a lot of biblical texts, there is parallelism in this story, and it may actually be two versions of the story merged together. One of them focuses on Shemyaza, one of them focuses on Azazel. And in Shemyaza's version of the story, the main cause of the Watchers' fall, their corruption, is sex, is desire. They come down, they have sex with the daughters of men, and in the Old Testament, the Jews have this really big rule against mixing different things. You can't weave cloth of two different types, and you can't mix certain types of foods together, and you cannot mix certain races of people together. It actually is what was at the heart of the miscegenation laws that were why it was illegal in the United States up until, I believe, the 60s for a black person and a white person to get married. So, two things that were different were not allowed to mix and mate, and that was a huge bad thing. And so that's sort of like the bad thing that goes wrong with Shemyaza.
Can I?
Yeah.
How do we get another chunk? Is it with one of these guys?
Yeah, use that, the little cooler. The hell's handle. In Azazel's story, the great transgression is teaching both the daughters who are their wives, the daughters of men who are their wives, and the children forbidden knowledge that was reserved for heaven. And so in Azazel's part of the story, people are taught everything from divination to creating weapons and armor. Azazel himself teaches jewelry making, the arts of the forge, and cosmetics, all of which at the time come from things that you dig up from the earth. So metals and jewels and
So is that bad because it was forbidden knowledge or because it was mixing stuff again?
In Azazel's case, it's bad because it's forbidden knowledge. Now, whether you go off of the mixing things and having sex with things bad, or teaching, forbidden knowledge bad, either way, it ends with a cry going up to heaven, And well, okay, I'm skipping over a part where basically they make a very extensive empire on Earth. Their children are amazing and tall and strong and have these kind of terrifying appetites. They drink blood, they eat flesh, they consume all in their path. They like really start just taking everything on the earth and making use of it for their own hungers, which is an interesting lesson for now. A cry goes up to heaven from earth and from the people who are being taken advantage of and having all of their things fed upon by these bloodily bold sons and daughters of the Watchers. And some angels get involved, and basically God sends the flood. And the Book of Enoch is where we see the days of wickedness that happen that we see in the Bible, and that punishment that leads up to Noah has everything to do with the Watchers and the way in which they sort of led people astray to create this society that was rapacious and hungry and was taking advantage of the bounty of the earth and taking advantage of people on the earth. And so the flood comes. Before the flood comes, though, God passes judgment on the Watchers and their kids. Now, the judgment on the Watchers is also, by extension, a judgment on their children. They are condemned to watch their children turn against one another and fight to the death and destroy one another and destroy their works. Bad things ensue. So the fathers have to watch their kids just suffer. And then the fathers, like Shemyaza and Azazel, Azazel is bound hand and foot in the desert, in a fiery place called Dudael. Shemyaza, there's a related story where Shemyaza repents and is hung upside down between heaven and earth, never to belong to either again fully. And all of these figures get picked up in different stories. And so the Watchers themselves, since they are immortal and angels, can't be destroyed. They're punished in different ways. Their children have mortal bodies, and those are destroyed. Those can be destroyed. But they have immortal souls, being creatures of both heaven and earth. The spirits can't be destroyed. And there is a fantastic passage that I think is way too often overlooked by demonologists and theologians alike, where it clearly states that the souls, basically the ghosts of the Watchers' children, will be condemned to become unclean spirits, evil spirits on the face of the earth, and they will attack humanity, and they will attack women and children, and out of jealousy, they will continue to oppress and to possess living humans. So basically they become the demons that we write about and that we study about in the Judeo-Christian, actually really the Abrahamic faiths. And so the Book of Enoch and the story of the Watchers is pretty important if you want to study demonology from an Abrahamic perspective. No, it's nifty stuff.
I love how, even having been around you and heard you answer a lot of the similar questions before, there's always more to the story.
Well, the fun part is I got to just go wild, and so the Dictionary of Demons, the 10th anniversary edition, my editor was like, could you put in a couple of more footnotes for some of this? And I was like, oh honey, you want footnotes? Let me show you my footnotes.
4 months later.
Yeah, so I have a couple of sections in the back of the Dictionary of Demons that goes into the Watchers, the Book of Enoch, the idea of human angel hybrids, Nephilim, Gibberim, all of that, the connection to the Dead Sea Scrolls, the connection to our modern beliefs of demonic oppression, demonic obsession, and all the rest of that. And so if you want to like really kind of follow the breadcrumbs to that, I recommend poking around in the back of that book. And if you can't afford $50 for the limited edition hardback, a soft cover is coming out in May. But pretty much everything that I could compile from a scholarly angle. And I say scholarly because I prefer not to conjecture and insert my own personal beliefs, because I do have beliefs about the Watchers, partly because of some very weird conversations with my grandfather.
Are you okay talking about those beliefs, or is that
I'm kind of arranging my thoughts on that because it's a weirder. It's weird, and yet it's not weird if you know. So it was really popular, and you find this around the world too. But in the Middle Ages, especially in the Middle Ages, it was very common for there to be a belief in supernatural heritage among families. It's not only limited to Europe. You find this in Islamic folklore as well. Typically in Islamic folklore, the supernatural heritage comes down to a jinn in the family, from whom all of the children end up inheriting various abilities, most of them supernatural, like penchant for magic, stuff like that. In the European lore, you may have Tuatha De Danann. You may have an elf in the background, a fairy. There's a family in a noble family in France where they believed their story was a Quinatar, like this strange demi-human sea creature impregnated the queen, and then the Merovingian witch kings resulted from that. So that's to sort of set you up with the fact that it's not unusual, although we certainly have lost touch with most of these stories, for families at that time or around the world to believe that they've got an ancestor somewhere way back who wasn't human, or at least wasn't entirely human. So you need a little bit of background on my family history to have this sort of chronologically make sense. I never got to meet my maternal grandfather. I was raised by my gram, who ran him off. He had cheated on her and didn't sequester the second family he had far enough away, and that got very messy very quickly. She got a divorce. At a time, they were Catholic in the 50s, and she got a divorce, to give you an idea. So he's
done fucked up.
Yeah, he done fucked up. So I was raised by my Irish Catholic, lapsed Catholic grandma, and her side of the family. And I'd heard some stories about my grandfather, but they are exactly what you would expect from the embittered ex-wife of someone who had 5 kids with someone. Actually, I think something like 15 kids, only 5 of which lived. Like, she had so many miscarriages and stillbirths, it was ridiculous. So somebody who'd had a lot of kids with somebody and a pretty shitty time of it, and then found that she had been slept around on. And that was the woman that she knew about, and it's probably a good thing she couldn't read French, because there were a lot of postcards that came from France after he was over there during World War II. And they said things like, "Voici ma petite Jeannette."
Here's my little Jeanette.
Yeah, here's my little Jeanette. She misses her daddy. When are you coming back to France? So my grandpa was a dog, or a ladies' man, a womanizer, if you will. Probably would have been polyamorous had he realized that that was an option. And I did not get to meet him and actually talk with him until my middle 20s, after my mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer. So I was already in college, and I learned the story of the Watcher Angels my freshman year from Dr. Joseph Kelly, who became my advisor for most of my independent study stuff, and is a main reason why I ended up moving out of my English, mainly out of the psychology degree. I did finish the English degree, but moved into the religious studies department. So I learned about Watcher Angels and all this cool stuff, and of course he brings up the Watcher Angels because of my last name. My last name, I grew up with my grandmother telling me that you pronounce it Belanger. And if that sounds wrong to you, oh, it totally is. It was my grandfather's last name. As far as I can tell, my gram just wanted to murder it. And that was one way that she did so. So there's that. So I meet my grandfather after Dr. Joseph Kelly let me know that my last name was Bélanger and meant beautiful angel in French, and he was charmed by it. And we got to talk about various things related to this and whatnot. And a long story short, I learned about the Watcher Angels in my freshman year. Mom develops cancer. There's this big reunion with my grandfather, who had been estranged from all of his kids except for my mom, who had reconnected with him when she left stuff with my gram, for reasons. My gram is a complicated figure. We won't even go into that because she did her best. She was also a very broken human being. It was probably coming from a place of love. We'll go with that. It's an easier part of the story. We'll just gloss over it, in fact. So I meet my grandfather, and he doesn't just like blurt out, "Hey, we're descended from angels." And in fact, the first time I meet him, it doesn't come out at all. Just the way we pronounce the last name kind of comes up. And when I first meet him, I realize some of the reasons my grandmother maybe had some issues with me. And why our relationship was as very complicated as it was, because I never really looked like anybody I grew up with. But when I met my grandfather, I realized I looked like him. I even had mannerisms in common. Now, I wasn't as tall as him. He's 6'8", or he was 6'8". Big, rangy. He was a light heavyweight champion of the European theater in 1943. He boxed under the name Kid Baker. So, big, rangy guy. Whatever he was doing in World War II was behind enemy lines before Normandy Beach, and it involved him basically going undercover, hanging out with what looked like, what ended up being actual sexual partners, and possibly even marrying some of these ladies.
What better cover?
Yeah, well, anyway, and he's Acadian French. Okay, so all of that. Flash forward a little bit, and my mom's cancer gets worse. And this is, what year is this? I'm at the townhouse, so it's got to be like 1999 maybe, as late as 2000. And my mom calls up with this like kind of shaken, like, "Hey, I want to run something past you because it's the weirdest thing I've heard in a while." And my mom was like, "Okay, hon, you understand some of this stuff. I know you studied some of this stuff. Could you tell me if there's anything about like angels that came down and had sex with women?" And I'm like, "Where is that coming from, Mom?" And she's like, "Well, so your grandfather told me that I didn't need to be afraid of dying because the reason we're all tall and the reason we're all charismatic and the reason that we all have a musical ability is we're part angel." And I was like, "Did he mention the Book of Enoch?" And she's like, "What?" I was like, "Okay. Did he mention Nephilim, Watchers, Grigori? What?" So the story as it unfolds is that my grandfather's grandfather had told him at a certain point of coming of age that this was just a family fucking history for the Bélangers. And that periodically the family would even intermarry these two lines, the Luciers, lights, and the Bélangers, in order to, and I fucking kid you not, keep the bloodline pure. Like that was literally the language they used. To the point of sometimes arranging marriages between first cousins. What he left out, and what I found out with genealogy later, was he was talking about his mom and his dad. They were first cousins, and they'd been arranged, which we won't even get into like what kind of a wrinkle that put into his world, because it was a point where his dad just got up and was like, "Okay, we had enough kids, bye."
Wow.
Changed his name and moved to the other side of town. And then just refused to acknowledge anybody. Just, "Nope, I'm this other person, bye."
Wow.
So leaving my great grandmother Victoria to raise grandfather and Jean and a couple of, I don't remember who all else. So next time I get to sit down with my grandfather, I'm like simultaneously like, what the fuck? And also kind of excited and kind of like, okay, so here's maybe like a living tradition. Like, is this actually like a family lineage? Like, that's super cool. But, you know, grandfather has all these stories, and maybe at the time we were never totally sure, like, was he full of shit or was it real? Like, he had stories about the war that seemed completely off the wall. And let me tell you, since his death, I've been able to confirm pretty much everything, like all of it. So, anyway, so family story and family history. The thing that I learned is he's what I would call a blue collar occultist. He was not one to read these sorts of books. He was delighted to find that the Book of Enoch existed, because as far as he was concerned, like that was pretty much, you know, proof that his grandfather wasn't pulling his leg, and it was family thing. I mean, he believed it 100%.
Before having seen the written evidence.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it was not just, you know, his grandfather telling him, it was a family thing. It was what explained their psychic abilities. The whole damn family had them. Aunt, or I guess whatever his sister would be to me, was like a tea leaf reader, and there were certain like divinatory practices that had been passed down in the family, none of which I ever got to learn from anybody. But there's just like this whole family history. So, you know, the funny thing is I was attracted and just fascinated by the story of the Watchers long before this, and had been like, you know, just hip deep into it just because I love the Apocrypha. I love the stories of the Bible that either didn't make it all the way into the modern Bible or got cut out of it, and like what those tell us about like lost folklore and different belief systems that sort of like got folded into or erased. I think of it like the conceptual strata of belief.
You're a geologist of people's brains.
Yeah, well, and or mythic traditions. So the irony being that like here I am like delving into the academic side of it, and then my grandfather like lays this bomb on me of like, oh well, yeah, very very casually, yeah, that's us.
That's where we come from.
And the fact that mythology like continued all the way down is fascinating to me, and has definitely fueled like continued research into like at what point did people know about the Book of Enoch, and we know that they like Western Europe lost track of this book entirely. They didn't have a copy of it again until the early. It was explorer James Bruce, a descendant of Robert the Bruce, who collected a couple of manuscripts from a monastery in Ethiopia at the end of the 1700s, and it wasn't translated into English for like another 20 or 30 years. So around about like the 1820s was when this story started to come out again, as with the backup that like this is a religious text, that this, and notably the Coptic Ethiopian church, it never stopped being canon. It is still a significant part of their belief system, and it is not something that is sort of like, you know, poo-pooed as. I think mainly the reason that it got cut out had to do with the angel sex. A lot of stuff, there was a lot of debate, very heated debate at that time period that it started to fall out of favor, that revolved around the dichotomy of spirit versus flesh, and how flesh was gross physical matter, and that anything of the fleshly world was by its nature corrupt and corrupting, and that anything that was heavenly could not have any connection to the flesh. This is at a time where there was a heresy that Jesus did not even take up flesh. He was not physically born. He only looked like a human. He was too pure for a body, and that's why he didn't die. That's why he was resurrected. And the thing is like, there's so much debate about it.
I wonder if they had heard of Occam's razor.
I'm pretty sure Occam's razor exists because of debates like that.
Yeah. Also, the notion of purity is just a strange one.
Well, that's got connections to Persian religion that got kind of folded into things.
I mean, the funny thing is, we're all made from the same atoms. Not Adams, but atoms. I don't know. It's hard to. I mean, if you dig deep enough, it's hard to think of anything as more or less pure than anything else because
Yeah.
we're all pure, the stuff of the universe. We have electrons and protons and neutrons, and like
Yeah, I mean,
we do all look different on the outside. But
the stuff with the Book of Enoch, though, like we've been watching Lucifer, and I gotta say, somebody's doing some pretty fun research for it, and I like some of their takes on things. Very much more influenced by Jewish takes on angels and demons than on Christian ones, which I appreciate because I think the Christian like war in heaven and hell, damnation, redemption stuff is just a little tired. But the one thing that I finally was just like, is when Amenadiel like has the baby. Spoilers, sorry. And there's like, oh, this is the first time there's ever been a human and angel baby. And I'm like, did you miss? Oh yeah, you totally missed that whole thing, didn't you? Let me introduce you to Shemhazai and Azael.
gotcha. We missed the whole book of the Bible, guys.
Well, and not just one book, like not just the Book of Enoch, because that story is in the Midrash of Shemhazai and Azael. It's referenced in the story of the Star Maiden. I mean, like it's in multiple texts, both Christian and Jewish. But again, you know, angels having sex is a fairly controversial idea. And that whole mixing of human and angel stock is seen as a pretty bad thing. So,
are there any source materials that you would recommend for beginners that deal with Abrahamic demonology or Watcher angels?
I mean, I'd go straight to the source and read the Book of Enoch. There's a couple of translations that are available. The most common one is going to be by a guy named R.H. Charles, who was working at the tail end of the 1800s. There has been some new stuff that has come to light since there. So I'm trying to remember if it's Nichols or Nicholsburg. I think it's Nicholsburg, Nickelsburg, who has an updated translation that draws upon a couple of extra things. So that's a good one to look at. There is a collection by Rabbi Moses Gaster that you can find on just like sacred-texts.com. It's in the copyright-free domain, and it is called the Chronicles of Jeremiah, Jerahmeel. And honestly, if you just Google whack Midrash of Shemhazai and Azael, it'll come up. The Chronicles of Jeremiah is like this long, rambling thing of like from Genesis on down, and it tells some familiar biblical stories and then some kind of elaborated upon biblical stories in the style of a midrash. And Shemhazai and Azael kind of goes into that whole like angels coming down and having kids thing. Let's see. I'm trying to think of like accessible works looking at it from the perspective of demonology that would be beginners works, because the problem is a lot of this stuff is mostly over in the realm of academia. So I would recommend the work of Annette Yoshiko Reed, R-E-E-D, but I will warn you that I find her writing dense and a little difficult to get through. So with that in mind, that is what it is. She is definitely writing to an academic audience, but she's got some really great stuff. Trying to think. All of the books that I would recommend are in the bibliography of the Dictionary of Demons, if not directly in the footnotes in those sections of the Dictionary of Demons. I have promised myself at some point to like do a book that's exclusively devoted to this topic, and the stuff that's in the Dictionary of Demons is sort of a seed for that. The difficult thing for me has been, how do I approach that book? Do I just go pure scholar and like, here are the things and the books and the stuff, and just cut out the personal side of it? Do I just come at it from the personal side and use the rest of it as kind of counterpoint? And I haven't quite made up my mind on how that story gets told. Trying to think of who else or what else is out there to reference.
But those might all slightly be stuck together.
That's fine.
Okay.
What else?
Sort of like topics in a book.
Huh?
They're sticky.
Yeah. I mean, this one in particular. I mean, if you look back at all of the stuff, like most of my work over the past 20 years has been, to one extent or another, like an exploration of different aspects of this curious family history and the mythologies to which it is connected, from, you know, the music that I did with Joseph Fargo and William Piotrowski for Blood of Angels on down. You'll see the theme over and over and over again as I kind of like try to figure out, like, what do I believe about it? Like, you know, what is my truth with this?
I suppose I could actually say out loud what I was typing.
Okay.
Storm was saying that they want to support all the books you write, and my first impulse was like, we actually have PDFs on the website store now, which is amazing.
Yeah.
They're all the self-published books, because you can't do that with ones that publishers have put out themselves. But that's exactly why we started the Patreon.
Yeah.
It's like, you have all these book ideas. Publishers don't necessarily want to like publish them. They want to, you know, if you propose them, they might say change them or do them in this order.
So the what was going to be the Blood of Angels book before there was a Blood of Angels CD was when I was still working with Wiser. And this is how that conversation went. I was like, hey, this is the next thing that I'm thinking about working on. And the person with the company, who was one of the people running the company at the time, was like, oh, I know. What it should be is how angels are walking among us. And you could be an angel, Michelle, and these other people could be angels. And I'm just like, I don't want to talk about that side of things. I want to talk about, no, but like people would just eat that up. I'm like, I don't want to write something just because people would eat it up. Like, that's not the purpose here. You know, regardless of whether or not I'm a fucking angel, and pardon me, but that's really personal.
If you thought gender was personal, wait for this.
Yeah, like if that's like immediately where you jump, and that's also why, like, I haven't worked on that project. Like, I went and did a music CD about it instead, because like that was a little bit more than I really like. That was off-putting. That is also not the narrative that I necessarily want to go digging around in. Like, I'm good with being autobiographical for some of my stuff, but it's the same thing that's kept me from doing, you know, for the longest time, the past life book, because everybody wanted it to just be about me or about my past lives. And honestly, like, I'd rather talk about how do you understand these things for yourself, rather than be like, you know, long time ago I was so and so and rah, 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 rah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you also certainly have a personal angle that you usually take, which is more towards teaching and providing useful information to other people. That's like interspersed with stories about yourself and how you came to understand things that way.
Well,
but like those are illustrative.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's not just me being like, you know, here's.
Look, I'm fancy.
Well, it's more that I find it more useful to help give people information that would lead them to discover better what they believe, than just dictate to them what I believe. Because I mean, what I believe, that's my path. Like, that's my truth. That's not necessarily theirs. I don't expect it to be theirs. I wouldn't want to color their experiences by assuming it should be theirs. Like, that goes against everything that is important to me.
What was I thinking I was going to do? Oh, there was a question. What are your thoughts on Lilith?
A very complicated figure. Actually came up on one of the things that we were doing last, because it related to Pazuzu.
Right.
So, and this is going to be a rehash of some information that we'd already covered and a couple of other things. Lilith, like a lot of mythological figures, has evolved over time, and where she started and how we understand her now are not the same thing. You can see shades of what we understand in where she started, but to understand like how she got here, you have to sort of also get a sense of the journey. So the first time Lilith shows up in Western literature is in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and she is barely recognizable as like the de facto mother of demons and, you know, basically female prince of the night. She is a spirit associated with a tree. There is an owl that also lives in the tree, in the branches, and there is a serpent that lives in the roots of the tree. There's no point in the text where the owl or the serpent seem to be directly connected to Lilith. It's a brief mention. She is not a main character in this. It's literally like Gilgamesh goes over to this tree and there's this Lilith spirit and she screeches at him and then she flies away. Like it's not a big deal.
And from that.
And from that, there's a whole lot of stuff that gets extrapolated. Now, behind that, we know that there must be oral history where this figure develops and evolves. Now, before you have Lilith as an individual being who is sort of a queen of darkness, you have the Lilim or Lilitu. Lilim, Lilitu, those are words that are plural, and they reference a class of being. So basically many Liliths, as we would understand her, many these sort of like, well, they haunt the waste places. So deserts and forests and places where there are not many human civilizations. Basically where human civilization has not encroached. There is an association with wild animals and with owls, which I think to this day is one of the reasons why in Middle Eastern lore, owls are a very negative critter. Owls and dogs both are evil, unclean, bad omens. It's also why it's really hard to do like conservation with owls, particularly in the Middle East, because you kill them, they're bad. You shouldn't see an owl, that's a bad omen.
Oh dear.
Anyway, so not to get too sidetracked, but so Lil, the root word means storm. So there's also some connection to storm demons or deities. And over time, the Jews get a lot of their demonology and angelology from the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Akkadians, which is a cluster of people that all lived in broadly the same space and kind of inherited one another's culture. The Sumerians came first, Babylonians, Akkadians, and it's, if you want to like look up some of this, it is usually under the aegis of Assyriology. So think Assyria. Anyway, there's a point where Lilith becomes a discrete individual being. She gets folded into rabbinic lore as the first wife of Adam. Now, again,
Bad wife.
that is extra biblical. You don't see that in Genesis. There's no Neil Gaiman makes sort of like an oblique suggestion that at the very beginning, like male and female made he them. If you look at the Hebrew for the creation of man, there's an implication with the gendered language that man was originally hermaphroditic and was split equally between a male and a female form. And reading between the lines with that in midrashes and rabbinic lore, the female counterpart of Adam is Lilith. Now she is his equal in all things, created at the same time, created of the clay like he is. And how she develops in rabbinic lore with that is she does not like to yield to her husband. She is his equal and she demands to be treated as such. Down to basically she likes it on top, and Adam's not too keen on that. So she ultimately gets cast from the garden. To in further lore about her, she goes and takes up residence in a cave. I believe she ends up like, kind of east of Eden, like the land of Nod. Notably, remember when Cain and Abel split and they like go east of Eden, there is a land of Nod, and there are other people, and Cain goes and like shacks up with these other people. So, spoiler alert, it doesn't all make sense. If you go with the idea that Adam is the first man, or like the first human being ever, in other parts of the lore, instead of copulating with mysterious other human beings who are there, Lilith has sex with a variety of things. Beasts and animals and angels that she lures to her cave, and she becomes the mother of demons. In rabbinic lore, she is used as a cautionary tale for women to be subservient to their husbands, to be nice Eves who are made explicitly for their husbands and made to be a part of their husbands and are therefore subordinate by nature to them. And yeah, exactly. I don't agree with that. I'm Team Lilith if that's the case. Over time, different aspects of both Jewish and Christian lore, she becomes the bride of Lucifer, the mother of demons, a queen of hell. There are some, so Lil in Sumerian is connected to the word storm, but like Layla, some other parts of it in Hebrew is connected to night, which is how she becomes kind of de facto the night demon. She is seen as a figure who, because her children, like basically because she wasn't able to have kids, like natural normal kids with Adam, that didn't work out, or maybe they were killed. She's got something about babies, and something against babies in childbirth. So she becomes also basically the demon. We know Lilith had many names and many forms in Jewish lore because there were all of these amulets that came down to us from the ancient world that typically were protecting women in childbirth from Lilith's attacks, and also protecting infants from Lilith's attacks, because she was the primary cause of basically sudden infant death syndrome. So if the child died within the first few days of being born, if they died suddenly in their crib, Lilith had come to steal them. So she has a big hate for mothers and babies. In some forms, she also lures men through her sexual charms and then kills them. And in that respect, she has a connection to a Sumerian Babylonian being called the Ardat Lili. And the Ardat Lili is a little bit more like a ghost. She is called the Maiden Ghost. And you can read about her in Reginald Campbell Thompson's work. And I'm sure that there are better translations now because he was somebody who was writing in the 1800s. The Ardat Lili had been a woman who died before she enjoyed the pleasures of the marriage bed. So she died as a virgin. And in that culture, that wasn't a good thing. She never got a chance to enjoy what it meant to be a woman by that culture's standards. And therefore, she would come back and appear to young men at night and want to lie with them. Only because she was a ghost now, her touch was deadly. And so she would lie with them and drain them of life, and they would die.
Well, it sounds a lot like a vampire story.
Yes, yes. There's a lot of interconnectedness between Lilith and some of her predations and vampires, which is how it's pretty easy to flash forward to modern lore, where Lilith is often presented as the mother of vampires. There's an arguable evolution there. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But also, another arguable evolution is Lilith as a feminist being who just rejects being told that she must submit to a man and goes off and forges her own path. She, kind of the original "fuck you, I won't do what you tell me."
If Adam was being an incel, which kind of sounds like he was.
Well, I mean, pretty much his dad was like, yeah, sure, here's this thing.
Yeah.
Here's this object.
Here,
and,
did I make the first one too independent for you?
Yeah.
Can I borrow your rib?
Yeah, hold still.
It is such a dark story in so many ways.
Yes, it is.
Let's see if there are any more questions popping up. Nope, people are just
The thing with
really
Lilith
enjoying
is
listening
I
to you.
don't know a lot of like good reliable books. There's only a few good books on Lilith. And there's not many that like cover all the weird aspects of her. It's worth looking up the Lilith amulets and like the Jewish approach to Lilith as a night demon and a demon of child death, and you know, the demon who afflicts childbirth, because you get little stories about her in that. And it's worth looking at the Epic of Gilgamesh just to find, like, if you blink, you will miss it. The first appearance of Lilith in literature that we at this point that survives.
And my finger's starting to get a little raw here.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of Kyphi left.
I know. I'm starting to think I'm understanding why you ordered as many labels as you did.
Yeah.
I was like, surely not that many.
Yeah.
Because I've been thinking that, with the pre-orders only having 15 or so lots available was
Yeah.
because, it would probably only be 20 or 30 that we made.
No, this
is a lot more than 20 or 30.
Yeah. It's also why when I made the stuff in June of 2019, there was a bunch that I froze. And then took out and defrosted. Although I'll be honest, I don't know that freezing it is so that first batch, freezing it made sense because with purely dates, and maybe a little bit too much wine, it never completely firmed up. It took forever to stop being super goopy.
Yeah.
Almost a year to really cure. And I mean, live and learn. But this one is much less of a problem. Like when I was rolling that other one, the reason I gave up rolling it and the reason I got this fucker was literally I was scraping it off my hands.
God.
It was just it was like my fingers. I started to look like a Golgothan shit demon, only with Kyphi just all stuck to my fingers and it was blah.
I know, if my fingers can only take so much, maybe we should pause soon.
That's why I told you we're not doing this whole thing.
But you're very wise, man.
What?
Wise
Also,
in the ways of
this
Kyphi.
might help.
What's that?
Just roll into a little bit and then kind of take it off from there. So basically, what's abrading you is mostly probably the lemongrass. As much as I ground the lemongrass down, it's still
chunky.
Yeah, it's still chunky in there. So, yeah, get a little bit of the dust on it first.
That's what I've been doing.
Okay, well,
it's been helping.
Yeah, and you have rolled significantly more than me. Because I've just been sitting here yapping about Lilith and Watcher Angels and weird family histories.
Like you do.
My grandfather doing weird tricks on horseback.
Imagine
Imagine seeing because my brain broke to see all 6'8" of him standing on the back of a horse riding like this.
Yeah, that would be extra.
You know how I get into my head to do just weird shit and then learn it and do it?
Yeah, like making Kyphi.
Yeah, no, grandfather was the same way.
Riding horse, well, standing on the horse.
He apparently got it into his head to learn how to do trick riding on a horse.
I feel that our future would be full of interesting surprises.
Played piano, played guitar, wrote music.
Oh, there's a question. Will these be sold in small tins, or will we be doing any bulk?
I wasn't planning on bulk.
I mean, there's not, you know,
Yeah.
despite it taking a long time to roll, there's not very much of it.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't planning on bulk, partly also because of just the expense. But we have picked up, these are the tins that I have picked up, and they do not have their labels yet, but they will have labels, and there will be Kyphi in that, and so it'll be individual tins. This isn't really something that I would be comfortable selling in bulk, because each batch is just kind of, think of it as artisanal incense, like there's just a small amount. And I don't know that selling it in bulk would be fair to people who, like, yeah, I'm not comfortable selling it in bulk.
Yeah, I think that's entirely fair.
Also trying to figure out how to put a price on that.
Yeah.
It's hard enough.
We do it one time.
Well, I mean, just like
Buy your 9 pieces.
the cost of the ingredients, and I don't even want to calculate the cost of the labor. Like, we'll just pretend the labor didn't, like, go into that so much.
Labor?
If what would have,
This isn't labor, is it?
that's why we're talking to everybody, to make it a little bit less.
It's laborious
Yeah.
feeling. Yeah. Gosh. Yeah, I mean, the whole time, I guess I haven't really necessarily told you what I've been putting out in the newsletter. I mean, I did read your
I
newsletter.
think I read, well, I didn't read the whole thing.
No, but I read it to you.
Yeah.
For approval.
Yes.
One does. That whole thing about I was going to post however much we had
Yeah.
on Friday was because I thought we would be done rolling it on Friday. And then we could, you know, put the rest up in the web store. I mean, we might already have rolled more than the pre-orders.
Yeah.
I feel like we have.
I'm certain we've rolled more than the pre-orders. We definitely can
So we
put
can
it.
put some up.
Yeah.
And maybe even some more than that if we're planning to
Yeah.
roll it every day or two till it's been done rolled, been rolled.
Well, and then there's the lunar eclipse one.
Yeah. Coming up next.
And that's the one that I have to like write up a completely different recipe list because it was a bunch of solar stuff, like a completely different stuff. That one was done for protection during the dark hours and is connected to the god Set, who, if you go with Coptic Greek stories about Set, he's a bad guy. He's a god of chaos and earthquakes and whatnot. But if you go to the older stuff, he is the god who stands at the prow of the bark of Ra when Ra is in the underworld, and only Set has the strength to overcome the serpent Apophis, the dark chaos that seeks to take the soul of Ra, the sun, into his coil and sink the bark so that the sun will not be reborn in the morning. So Set is the protector during the dark hours when the sun is most vulnerable, and is the only one who is strong enough to be triumphant against the great serpent. Yep. And Apophis in a lot of ways is a representation of primordial chaos. And the funny thing is the later versions of Set become associated with Typhon and the serpent. So basically, by the time you get to Greco-Roman times and Coptic Greek times, Set has become associated with the being he was originally known to overcome. He was equated with his enemy. He just had some really shitty PR.
What does the Kyphi smell like when it's burnt?
Or sweet,
heated.
Sweet at first. Warm. There is a sort of syrupy fruit undertone, and then you get into the frankincense and the myrrh, and a little bit of like the warm spices.
To me, it also smells a little bit like pine.
That's
not pine exactly, but like a sort of
that's the frankincense.
fresh sharpness.
That's the frankincense.
Cool.
Frankincense has a piney scent to it.
Okay.
And not quite like sharp, like, you know, pinyon pine or whatever, but it is a similar sort of like tree sap
Yeah.
And like some frankincense has a little bit of like a fruity undertone or almost like a spicy undertone, but it always has a little bit of that pine resin. And the pine resin, that between that and the myrrh, there is a almost clean medicinal smell. And one of the things about Kyphi is, since it's so many different things layered together and then like cooked and cured, is it has a range of scent as you are warming it up. It's also why you want to warm it slow rather than burn it all at once. Because you burn it all at once, you're probably going to get some of the frankincense and myrrh scent, but you're not going to get like that nuanced, these layers of scent that are releasing also the mint and the aspalathos and the, let's see what else is in there, cinnamon and sapparis root. Sycamore wood.
An escapee.
Well, I've just decided to like say fuck it with the pork, and that works just as well.
I feel like what really happened is you gave up on trying to keep any part of your hands clean.
Yeah, that too.
'Twas a noble undertaking, but doomed.
Well, also we've got this, and we can just collect all the benzoin. Fortunately, of all of the things, benzoin's probably some of the least expensive.
We are going through it, so that's good.
More where that came from. Herbco.com, I think, is where I got the benzoin. It's one of the ones that it's like, it's not necessarily, like, I'm not sure that it's wildcrafted. Herbco.com seems mostly okay. But also, benzoin's not one of the ones that's like super, super, super rare.
So you gotta keep it at least a little more sustainable.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not.
Hard to say.
So super rare, or not super rare.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it all depends on the practices of the people raising it.
Yeah.
Hi. While we are here, I am actually going to update.
Oh, your poor computer.
Oh yeah, it is a little sticky, isn't it? Probably smells great. I'm going to add some of the silver moon Kyphi to stock because I am confident that we have
Silver mirror.
Mirror.
Yeah, silver
Sorry.
mirror. Think of it as the mirror into which you would gaze by moonlight. The mirror represented by the moon.
What do you think? Easily another 15.
Yeah, easily another
days
15.
now. Okay, so right now, as we speak, we're updating the stock of the Silver Moon Kyphi. It is now updated and should be on the web store.
And we
not
will,
sold out anymore.
yeah, and we will try to space things out because we also are very aware that now is a time where money is tight for everybody, and getting tighter, and everything is pretty uncertain. It's a hell of a time. So, you know, my request is, yes, this is rare. Yes, this is like a one-time batch, and please make sure you take care of yourself first before you buy stuff. You know, make sure your pets are fed, make sure yourself is fed. Don't sacrifice that. Don't sacrifice food or home security or health security. Please. I am not worth it. Nothing is worth it. Take care of you first.
Stay alive. Keep your family strong. Or chosen family.
Yeah, grandfather's stories about what he was doing during World War II were the things that I had to actually like look some stuff up.
Where did you go to look stuff up with that? Because I was
so one of the things that was confirmable was he claimed to have been taught jujitsu exclusively by this, and I didn't catch the name. Like, you got to understand, almost all of these stories were told to me on a single visit with my mom, and this was like one of the few times Mom went to sleep. We ended up in his room. He played some music and just started to ramble. And so like it's not like I was sitting there with a notebook. I'm just trying to like memorize everything he's saying.
Yeah.
So he told stories about being trained in street fighting, and jujitsu and a couple of other things. But the jujitsu thing made no like I didn't think that they had jujitsu or people who would train it during World War II outside of the East.
Mhm.
As it turns out, there was a specific teacher who taught in France. And
Interesting.
from every indication, that is who my grandfather learned from.
So neat.
Yeah. Now, he never directly said that he was killing Nazis, but it really seems like that's what he was doing. He was behind enemy lines. He was clearly doing stuff with the resistance. I do know that it was to lead up to things that were that led up to D-Day.
The good old days when we could all admit that Nazis were bad.
I do know that it required him to move around in several places, to insert himself into the local populace, to pass for a native Frenchman. He was initially selected for it because he's Acadian French and he looks. You'd figure he's 6'8". He stands out like a sore thumb, but he has very French features. Had very French features, and he spoke French, so
It helps.
Yeah.
It smells so good.
Well, you're going to be smelling it for a while.
I know. It's a good time to not take a shower for the rest of the night.
I have considered, like, I did pick up some supplies to try to take this and, like, work it into hand lotion and things. Like, so I've got some things to experiment with, and if it works, that will be something that I add. I think the likeliest experiment to work will be the wearable Kyphi that is going to be using a salve. It's basically like the Burt's Bees base that you use for, well, it's used for a number of different types of salves, different types of lip balm. It is a mix of olive oil and beeswax for the base, and then you mix essential oils and whatnot into it, and then let it like solidify. And I'm going to try to make a Kyphi blend that you can then just wear.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
What is your favorite paranormal investigation?
What one I mean, I will say in terms of like which one like kind of blew me away and I felt I learned the most on was Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum.
In Portals to Hell.
In Portals to Hell. Let's see. The glove one is probably my favorite as it ends up like by the end of it and the way you see it on TV, because like we couldn't have planned some of the evidence that happened. Like that was just really fucking cool. So that was a Paranormal State one. And then I don't know, like a couple of just like the private things that I've done, with folks like Madison Seminary, some of the work with Becca, like helping her learn how to tap into her abilities and best assess what she's doing.
Yeah.
I really like the dueling psychic stuff that she and I will do.
Yeah, that's so fun.
So like the things at like Gill House and St. Joe's.
And Inspiration House too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do.
I guess that wasn't dueling psychic,
I'm
so.
biased. I do like Inspiration House, but that's like this slow, ongoing, like getting to know what's going on with that house. And I do like that there's still some mystery to it.
And that's also a neat kind of investigation for you as the owner because, there's not a time limit. It's not like go in, go out, and try to figure out what just happened. Like you can amass so much more evidence over time.
Well, also I get like, so if we were just going to Inspiration House and the music box is played once or twice, I would never know for sure. Like, was it just me moving around? Was it just like the creaking of the house? Like, was that a one-time thing?
Yeah.
And knowing that it's almost every single time.
Yeah, it's all the time.
Yeah, all the time in the house. Or like the footsteps and stuff, and having a chance to like get to know the house and know the noises that it naturally makes and know like what are house noises versus those are definitely footsteps.
Yeah. Or that one time there were like a family of raccoons in the vent.
Yeah.
That was different.
Possums. It was actually possums.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Scary. Their faces are scary.
Yeah, no, I tried to actually get one of them out of the vent, and it was not very happy with me. Because I was down there going, no, seriously, something's not right here. And like I hear the scrabbling, and I move one of the couches, and the little baby possum is like looking up at me through the vent, and is like, ah.
Seriously, their faces, they look like demons to me.
They do really good stuff.
Otherworldly.
Yeah,
They do.
They've got
They
those
totally
little
do.
peg-like teeth though, because they mostly are insectivores.
Mm.
They eat ticks. They're really helpful.
Mm.
They just get a bad rap because they don't look cuddly. To be fair, they don't act cuddly either. So
No, they really don't. They hiss a lot. Or
so do
their
cats.
faces look like they hiss.
No, they hiss.
Okay.
So do cats though. When they don't like things. What are you looking at, Ozzy?
Probably a bug. Do you have any interest in learning to make amber resin? I think that would be a fun research project to undertake since the ingredients and formulas are so secret.
Well, okay. I know what type of amber you're talking about. So amber incense versus amber resin are two different things. So like there's like the amber that is harvested. Let me step back. There is fossil amber that is usually associated with like the Baltic Sea and whatnot. Was electrum. It is where we get like the word it used to be called electrum because fossil amber has an electrical charge. You can get it to spark if you rub it against things.
Huh.
But fossil amber, which is literally like fossilized resin, you can't burn it and get a scent out of it. Like that's a completely different thing. Now there is a type of amber that is sold as an incense, and one of its main ingredients is benzoin. It's what gives it that like honey-rich, sweet scent.
And the benzoin does smell really good.
Yeah, and then it's mixed with a bunch of other things. I can look into it. It actually, I think, is easier than Kyphi when it all comes down to it.
It would be challenging to have something more difficult than Kyphi.
Fuck yeah.
Just gonna say. Like, way to jump into the deep end.
Yeah, well, and Bakur, so like the Middle Eastern incense that is resin and like pressed, like a lot of woods and resin like pressed into little bits. It seems like the obvious inheritor of this sort of incense, this Kyphi incense.
Yeah.
It would be a logical one to kind of play around with learning, but it relies a lot on like oud wood, agar's wood, or aloes wood, which is prohibitively expensive. They started making synthetic aloes wood. So aloes wood, if you don't know agar wood, aloes wood, oud wood, it's funny, most of the stuff that we use to make incense comes from stressing out or harming or infecting trees or other plants that these things come from. So like gum mastic is as rare as it is, not because the trees that it comes from are rare, but the circumstances that cause those trees to be stressed in just the right way so that they weep these tears of this resin only happens on chimes anymore. Frankincense is also like it's the tree weeping. It's the tree giving up its resin from wounds and whatnot. Agar's wood, aloes wood, or oud wood comes about from a specific fungal infection in a specific type of tree that gets into the heartwood.
Wow.
And it changes the scent of the wood. It's I think called jingo in Japanese, because it's called sinking incense, because it becomes so heavy and dense with the resin that gives it its scent that the wood sinks instead of floating.
Wow.
I think this is.
Do you know how long this has been going on, this live stream?
How long? I have no idea.
Okay.
At least 2 hours, 2.5 hours?
Exactly 2 hours. You just hit 2 hours. Just now.
Okay, well, we have quite a lot.
My one finger is real. I need finger protection. Ow.
Okay, so first thing is I'm gonna get all this one.
That's a really weird one. I tried to get as much actual Kyphi off of it, but it seems like it's just a chunk of wood.
Yeah, it's something that it's probably I don't know which one of the ingredients it is, but it's clearly something that didn't get ground down properly.
Yep.
All right, so I'm gonna
Okie dokie.
take this and try to.
But before we get into lots of fiddly loud things,
Okay.
do we want to say goodnight to everybody? And
Sure.
And we'll. When do you want to do this again? I know before it was like every day.
Well,
It might be good to take
I
a break
can't
tomorrow.
I can't do every day because I'm doing the stuff for the Minnesota Para-Unity Fest.
Yep.
And that's
Monday,
what
there's
time?
a
1
super
o'clock?
secret time.
2 o'clock?
Tomorrow, yes, tomorrow at 1:30 in the afternoon, Michelle will be giving a presentation talking about paranormal investigation some more for the Minnesota Para-Unity Con. You can find tickets to that are available on their website. They're also on our newsletter, Newsbites, which is actually just a Google group. So you can search for it and it will come up and you can join it and then see all the things that we've shared. That's tomorrow. Monday, there's a super secret new thing that we can't talk about. We can't talk about it, but I'll tell you about it later.
Oh, okay.
And I actually already told you about it, but more later.
Slipped my mind.
We could do a Sunday.
We could actually. Sunday's not a bad day. I'm still trying to coordinate with John Tenney for like a good time for us to do a recording of just him and I picking a topic and going.
Most fun podcast ever.
Yeah, so far he was like, "How about Saturday?" I'm like, "I've got a lot going on Saturday, so I don't know that that's gonna work, but we'll see."
Okay.
So
I would say we will aim for Sunday, and we will post it on Facebook. And I'll try to get Michelle to post it on Twitter. That's the one account I don't have access to. So I can't share it there. And it'll also be on the Patrons Discord for all of you who are on there, and on the House Kepler Discord for all of you who are on there.
And to give you guys an idea of how much we've rolled versus how much we have left, not gonna run out of this anytime soon.
Yep. I love that I can be ambitious and like you don't even tell me why you're like not responding to my idea that we'll just finish today, because you know that I'll eventually get there. I love you.
I'll show you how to get this stuff off your hands.
I mean, mostly I'm just covered in benzoin.
Yeah, there'll be probably a sticky layer. Olive oil helps.
Okay, cool.
And actually, like rinsing your hands with olive oil before you wash them helps.
Yep. All right. Good night, everybody.